to go ahead and get restarted here. I know some people might still be straggling back, but I gave folks till 11:02 and it's 11:03. So welcome back from the break. It definitely helps to stretch your legs after sitting in front of a computer for almost 2 hours. So hopefully you're a little bit re-energized because we've got a really great presentation for the second half of this morning. We're going to hear some very detailed information from Brandt Family Farm on how they've maximized profit per acre by implementing different soil health practices. And I'll give y'all just a brief introduction. Ann and Chris Brandt will be with us for most of the morning, and David Brandt will be joining us at the very end also for questions. But the Brandt Family Farm is more than 1,000 acres in central Ohio's Fairfield County. David began no-till farming in 1971 and has used cover crops since 1978. He's participated in research used by seed growers to improve cover crop varieties, as well as county agents and universities on no-till practices, reducing input costs and weed control. He's also been planting various blends of cover crops to assess the unique benefits diverse mixes can provide to soils. And Ann works the family business, Walnut Creek Seeds, in close collaboration. And my understanding is that Chris Brandt is the data wizard and the next generation for Brandt Family Farms. So welcome to all of you. We're also glad to welcome Van Slack. Van is an agricultural specialist with Muskingum Soil and Water Conservation District. You should have all received an input worksheet developed by Van that I know Ann will highlight as well. And if for some reason you didn't get that worksheet, maybe you signed up a little bit later, just send me a text with your email address and I'll be sure you get that spreadsheet. So yeah, at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ann. Thank you so much, Ann.
Well, thank you, Emily and Julia, and I'd like to thank OEFFA for giving us the opportunity to share what we've been doing on Brandt Farms. Chris, I don't know if you want to say anything. Any data questions or data collection? I'm going to turn that over to Chris because he's that young mind that knows all this technical computer stuff, and that's way beyond me.
I just spend way too much time in Excel.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so as you can see here, this is a picture of Brandt Farm. We like to call this picture our oasis picture because we try to, our goal is to every year 24/7 have roots in the ground, whether that's cover crops or commodity crops. And you can see our neighbors do not feel the same way. So this is our little oasis. So hopefully after the presentation that we give today, more people might be interested in growing their own oasis. So we will jump into it here if I can get, there we go. Okay, so we have seen an increase in profitability across all of our crops. We are in a 3-crop rotation, corn, wheat, soybeans, but that wheat could take a lot of different permutations. We can do small grains for the seed business. We can do wheat. We've done buckwheat. We've done sunflowers. We've done lots of other things in attempt to diversify. But typically we're in a 3-crop rotation. We do a mix of cover cropping and no-till. In order to successfully start a regenerative system, and we'll talk about more of what that means as far as the definition in a minute, but you really have to commit to the right mindset, commit to the right equipment, and commit to growing. You're definitely going to have failures, as we have had many. You're definitely going to have some successes. The goal is to learn and to grow and be committed to more regenerative practices. So we've seen not only increased profitability, but a lot of other soil health benefits that we'll list, but we are not trying to put an economic value to any of these benefits. We're going to stick with firm figures here. So by decreasing our input cost and our equipment costs, we're able to reduce our break-even point, and we will show that Van's tool that you guys will have access to is a great, easy visual tool to try different scenarios for your own operation and get a feel for what your break-even costs are going to be as far as yield versus commodity price, as well as Van can describe this a little bit later, but as far as not only break-even price where you're just not losing money, but to where you can begin to say you're farming successfully. So we maximize profit per acre, and that's what this whole presentation is going to show. We are not so focused on yield per acre. I can guarantee you we will never win a yield contest, because that is not where we're trying to be. We are trying to maximize our profit per acre. So we are also participating in Indigo Ag's soil carbon experiment, and we will present 1 year's worth of data on that as well. Okay, this is just a quick slide showing we don't have very many equipment costs. We've got a couple medium-sized tractors. We've got a planter, a drill, a crop roller.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but is there any way you could switch to a whole screen view? It seems like folks are having a little bit of trouble seeing your slides.
Okay, let me see if I can, is that better for that part? Is that better, Emily?
It's a little better. There's still some blocking on the top on the title, I think, but.
Okay, let me see what I can do with that.
Whatever you just did there, Ann, helped, but then it just bounced back. That's
okay.
Yep.
Let's see, hide video panel.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I can do for that. If any of the technical people can tell me what I need to do, that would be great, because I'm not sure what to do.
Sean is saying go up to the view link on the right hand side. Sean, is that for all of us or is that just for Ann?
I think that's just for Ann.
How does that look now?
Better. There's a block still kind of in the center of the screen.
Looks good now.
Yep.
Okay.
That's it. Whatever it is, stop right there.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, so as far as equipment, we don't have to have any big tillage equipment. Because of that, we don't have to have any big tractors. So we've got a couple medium-sized tractors, a crop roller, a drill, a planter, and a combine. So that really helps us streamline and not carry a whole lot of debt or expense on equipment and maintenance. So that has been helpful. All right, when we talk about regenerative practices, that could mean a whole lot of different things. So let's talk about definitions for the purpose of this presentation today. So on the far left, we're going to say full tillage, little to no rotation. So maybe corn, soybean rotation, and full treated seeds, and lots of tillage. Okay, we're gonna say for the purposes of this talk, then that's going to be far down on the regenerative practices number line, so to speak. And then what we're going to look at today is we're going to compare that system with a no-till system where we just take out the tillage but don't add in cover crops. And then we're going to compare that with no-till with cover crops. Now we can go a lot further to the right with higher level regenerative practices, and kind of at the peak of that pyramid would be organic no-till with covers and very long rotations and livestock into the operation. But that's not where we're going for this talk. We're going to stop with where Brandt Farms is at no-till with cover crops. So each one of those 3 systems that we're going to be taking a look at is going to have pros and it's going to have cons. Tillage, you know what? People have been doing it for hundreds of years. It's easy, it's consistent. We've got a lot of well-defined equipment around it that's been perfected, so to speak. We do have to deal with the erosion and purchasing the equipment, and we're really, you know, degrading our soil health. We're certainly not necessarily improving it. No-till, we're going to move up one rung on that regenerative ladder, and we're going to get to reduced erosion. And we got the lower equipment investment, but then what we saw when we first switched to no-till was we had more compaction, and you know, you need to use more herbicide because now you don't have that tillage step in there or steps in there to help take out weeds. So then when you move on to no-till with covers, which is where we've been at for close to 50 years now, we've been able to reduce inputs. We've been able to improve our soil health, lower our equipment investment, but the cons are there's a lot more variability in your potential success depending on how well you get your cover crops established. Depending on the weather, we've had a couple years now of cold, wet springs that has made life very difficult when you got cover crops in the field. And there is more intensive management. You really have to put thought into what you're doing. You got to have plans A, B, and potentially C, and you have to treat your cover crop plan with just as much attention as you treat your commodity crop plan. You can't skimp on your thought processes when it comes to your cover crop. You've got to have a plan, and typically not a 1-year plan, but a 2, 3, 4-year plan so you know where you're trying to wind up. Okay, so when we talk about soil health, in addition to reducing our input costs and reducing our equipment costs, we've increased soil health. I'm sure a lot of people that have heard about soil health have seen all of these different metrics and water holding capacity, reduced nutrient loss, and so forth. We are not going to try to attribute any economic profitability to these types of metrics. Other people have done it, but we're just going to stick with input costs, and we're going to stick with expenses. And while we know we're seeing all of these benefits, we're going to assume that it's showing up in our yield and in our other avenues. So we're not trying to fabricate, and I don't mean to say fabricate in a negative way, but we're not trying to attribute any of our increased profitability to these items right here at this time. But you can see the result in this picture on the right of your screen. That is our Cardington clay soils in our long-term no-till. So you get down about 3 feet, you can just start to see the Cardington clay peeking through that yellow area. But that's what we've been able to do with long-term no-till and covers and building organic matter and fabulous soil structure, which helps us with reducing the inputs and still getting good yields.
Okay, right. One second on the last slide for a minute. So we just got a question, are wet years worse for no-till compared to tillage? And I want to talk about that really quick. And this picture kind of demonstrate what I'm going to talk about here. So for normal no-till, a wet year could indeed be worse for tillage. The kind of practices that we follow at Brandt Farms nowadays, it's generally not pretty bad for us in a wet year, with one exception. What you're seeing in this picture is we have about 28 inches of mostly black Cardington clay soil with excellent water infiltration. So in a wet year, what winds up happening is all of that 28 inches is able to take in a lot of water really fast, and it prevents us from having a large amount of issues. The only times when a wet year is really bad for us in a high residue cover crop system is when there is so much water that all of those 28 inches becomes completely saturated. And at that point, that is when you can say, yes, it is definitely worse than in tillage, because there, at that point, there's really not much you can do about it unless you have pretty frequent tile spacings.
Or if you've got, like in the spring, if you've got a living cover crop in there, that can help alleviate by sucking out some of that moisture. But where the cover crops really shine is in drought years. Heads and shoulders, that's where you're going to get your absolute, you're really going to see a benefit of having cover crops. But like Chris was saying, in cold, wet years, especially in cold, wet springs, if you don't have a cover crop actively growing to help you pull some of that moisture out, and especially if you've got a winter kill cover crop sitting on the surface and you have a cold, wet spring, that could be a recipe for disaster. So while people may feel more comfortable with the winter kill because they're concerned about spring management, you can really set yourself up for a lot of problems in the spring if we've had the cold, wet springs that we've had for the last 3 years. But overall, when you've got a soil that has higher water holding capacity, you can hold a lot of that water. It's just like when Chris was saying, when your bucket's already full, it's got to go somewhere. So thanks, Chris. All right, for this case study, like I said, we're going to be comparing tillage, no-till, and no-till with covers. What we tried to do is really go for apples and apples and oranges to oranges. So we standardized a lot of the costs based on 2019 OSU custom equipment rates. We looked at 1 pound per nitrogen typically equals 1 bushel of corn. That's kind of the standard mantra. We used spring 2020 chemical prices. We used October 2020 crop prices, which is what they were at the day we were working on this. And then the soybean yields that we're giving were from conventional farmers in our area that were following these particular programs. And then the corn and soybean yields were from our farm on 2020. So the only difference with program 4, where you see Brandt Family Farms, the difference there between program 3, no-till and covers, is we incorporated our true equipment costs, which for the most part are less expensive than the OSU custom equipment rates. So we just wanted to show you what our true numbers were, but we did want to try to standardize across all 3 systems. So for programs 1 and 2, the tillage and the no-till, we assumed a corn, soybean, corn. So remember, we're trying to look at the lower end of the regenerative process here. So you've got limited rotation, you've got tillage, you've got treated seeds, you've got a full spray program and a full nutrient program. So then when we move up to the no-till with covers, we're looking at longer rotation, corn, soybeans, and wheat. Obviously no-till. We use, for the most part, all non-GMO seeds and untreated as much as we can get. Sometimes, we can't get all of them that we need untreated, or we don't get them early enough or whatever, but that's typically our goal. The average is we only use a post spray. We don't use a pre-spray, and we definitely have a modified nutrient program. So that's what we're going to be comparing in the rest of the talk. All right, here's the result, and we will work backwards to show you where we got these figures. So again, we do not focus on yield, we focus on profit per acre. So for our 3-year rotation, with the tillage and the no-till being corn, wheat, or corn, soybeans, corn, and us being corn, soybeans, wheat, you can see even with that wheat in there, which a lot of people don't want to grow wheat because they can make more money on corn and soybeans, we're still able to outperform in a 3-year profit per acre using wheat. And that wheat really, that longer rotation really is critical, because when that wheat comes off, that gives us the opportunity to put in that high biomass, high diversity cover, which really helps build the organic matter and gets those microbes going and really helps with the soil structure. When you're only doing corn or soybeans or corn soybeans, you're really hampering your ability to make large soil health improvements in any reasonable time frame. At least that has been our finding. Okay, I know this is a busy slide, so please forgive, but we did want to be as precise as we could be on where these figures were coming from. So this is year 1 corn, and we're looking at comparing no-till and cover systems with the tilled and only no-till. So you can see that we're around 500 per acre net profit compared to about 350 to 380 per acre for tilled and no-till. And here's how we came up with these costs. So we've got a cover crop seeding, we've got application and the cost of the seed, which the other 2 systems don't have. They have fall fertilizer application, which we don't do. We don't have any of the tillage involved. On an average year, we do not have a burn down application, but we'll talk about cost variabilities on a slide later to show you when we have a bad year versus a really good year and our average year. But this is our average year where we don't need a burn down application. For planting costs, again, you can see in the seed cost a reflection that we use non-GMO seeds, untreated, because we plant later than a lot of people are comfortable with, and we use shorter season corn. So we're typically planting in late May to early June. So we don't need those treatments on the corn seed. They haven't, we haven't found the cost benefit of those. We do incur a roller pass. And then we'll have a different chemical program for post spray. We will have a modified nitrogen program where we're only putting on usually 90 units. That can definitely go down depending on our cover crop and the year. We don't do fungicide applications. So you can see the yield is for the tillage, we were looking at 210, which is for every pound of nitrogen you put on, that's going to be what your yield is. For the no-till, you lose just a touch of yield, and then the 194.6 was our 2020 corn yields across all of our acres, and we're looking at a 417 commodity price. So that's where we're coming up with those figures.
Yeah,
Chris,
obviously, you're not going to see $500 normally for profit, but keep in mind that we don't have field rent on here. So if you go out to like Iowa where you're paying $250, $300 an acre, that's going to cut it down a lot. So just if you're wondering why the net profit is so obnoxiously high, it's because there is no rent on this slide.
Yeah, I mean, basically you can see every cost that we've got here. Now, if you've got storage and hauling, you can add that on there. And Van's tool that we'll look at later offers you the opportunity to do this. We were just comparing the process with the profitability. So we're not trying to encompass all costs. We're just looking at what costs are going to vary between these 3 different types of programs.
Yeah.
Okay, so year 2 soybeans, you can see we're still ahead of the game on the soybeans. So again, we've got our cover crop. We've got the difference in the no type of tillage, no pre-spray application. We've got, again, reduced seed cost because we do non-GMO beans. We do still have some acres where we'll use GMO beans if we need to, but then we have other acres where we've actually used public beans that we've cleaned and reused those. So there's different things you can do with seed cost to go up or down on that. So you can see the post spray. We still have a post spray, no fungicide application, and then the harvest. So you can see where we're looking at there. The 51 and 54, those were yields from farmers using these practices in our area, and the 61 is our yield across all of our acreage. All right, now we do have a 3-year rotation where we use wheat. Now you can see here with wheat, we still have profit. I will say that the farm has been growing for a couple years now, seed for the seed business, and we have not found the small grains cereal rye or triticale to be nearly as profitable in case, in some cases not profitable at all because we haven't gotten the yields where we need them to be. So we're still learning how to grow that well. So wheat is definitely where it's at if we were going to put this in here and have a 3-year profitable outlook on that. And Chris, I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not.
And there's just not much to say. We haven't gotten good yields on other crops aside from wheat. So
Yeah. So that is our, our Achilles heel. There's no way we'll move out of that 3-crop rotation. I could see extending it, but we will not move out of it because that is, again, the critical step to put in that high diversity, high biomass cover crop, which really helps us grow that organic matter and maintain our soil health. So that is what it is. So here's where we came up with that very first slide on the 3-year profitability. So you can see, even though we've got that wheat in there at lower profitability than corn and soybeans, overall we still wind up coming out ahead. Now, is that because we've got huge increases in yield? Absolutely not. It's because we've been able to lower our input costs and lower our equipment costs. So when we have improved yields, we look at that as a bonus, but that is not our expectation. Again, we are not trying to, and you see this all the time in discussions on cover crops and whether they're worthwhile and soil health. And it's always like, well, I lost a couple bushel yield here, so I'm not going to do it. Are you looking at not necessarily the yield, but where you can improve your profit per acre? And we're all about improving profit per acre. So that's a perspective change for a lot of people, but that's where we're focusing, and that's why we have found soil health and no-till with covers to be so profitable for us.
So we just got a question on the wheat. Do we sell it for pastry wheat, bread wheat? What happens with our wheat is we grow hard red winter wheat soft red winter wheat, because that is what our local elevator is willing to take. So what the elevator does with it, we don't know. We just, for the purposes of that slide, the wheat is just sent to the elevator. We don't do any special marketing of it to bakeries or whatever. It's just whatever the elevator takes.
Yeah, now Jay has been marketing wheat to bakers, but that is what do I want to say? That is an exploratory thing that we're doing right now. If we find a market, then we will begin growing heritage wheats. Right now, we've got einkorn that we're growing. We have been working with red Fife and Turkey Red, not grown on Brandt Farm, but if we can make markets for those, that is something that we can begin growing on Brandt Farm. But that is an exploratory thing right now. The only thing we have on the farm now is going to be cereal rye. We've got a triticale plot and some einkorn. So I don't know, Chris, do we have barley out there this year?
We have one field of barley somewhere.
Yeah. So like I said, we're trying to diversify and find other markets, but the kind of the fallback is always kind of the standard wheat. But we would love to get into food grade, but we're just kind of dipping our toes into that now, and I'm not sure how that's going to pan out, but we will see. All right, so this is looking at actual Brandt Farm and the variability that we were talking with before, because the more you rely on nature and you let nature do its thing, you are less in control. And I can guarantee you, with no-till and cover crops, you are less in control than what you are in a tillage situation. So not that that's a bad thing, but you just need to have, like I said, plan A, B, and maybe plan C. And you have to realize that in any given year, you're going to have to be able to respond to what nature gives you. So this is showing a little bit of our variability that we can see in any given year. So we've got a subpar year, which is going to be like, let's say we had poor cover crop establishment in the fall, or we had a cold, wet spring, we had more weeds come through, or the cover crop did not mature in time for us to get a complete kill on the roller crimper. So now you have to add in a burn down application, where in an average year or an optimal year, you don't have to worry about that because you got good cover crops. They matured at the proper time and you were able to take those out. So planting costs are going to stay pretty much the same. We will always put on a little bit of starter to get things rolling along there. Then post-spray application on an average year, yes, we need to post-spray. On an optimal year, when we get a great cereal rye, winter pea, crimson clover, hairy vetch cover crop that really handles the weeds well, supplies a lot of nitrogen, we're able to plant through it and roll it. We don't need a post spray because we've still got enough residue on there to handle our weed suppression for us, and we can go without any side dress application. So we don't even need to add that 90 units. Now, does that mean we're going to get the same yield? Absolutely not. But again, we're not focused on yield. We're focused on profitability per acre. So you can see how our total expenses will vary from year to year. We just plan for that, and we're prepared to, deal with the situation as it arises. Anything you want to add, Chris?
I would just say that if for the years here, just say subpar year 2018, average year 2020, optimal year 2017.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had all of these happen very recently.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This isn't just, oh, what if this happened? No, we have had all of these happen fairly recently. So that's where these numbers are coming from.
Yep.
Is the starter fertilizer? It is starter. Yes, 624-6 NPK. That is what that starter fertilizer is.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
All right, so here now we're going to get our first look at Van Slack's very clever Excel spreadsheet that he's done. That is, it gives a very quick visual on good, bad, and marginal. So what we've done is we've used his spreadsheet to plug numbers into, and this does include land rent cost. The only thing, all of the gray boxes up at the top in the tan box, those are data entry points for you. So you can put in the lowest price you think the commodity is going to reach. You can put in the lowest yield that you foresee happening, and then put in your other costs on the side there, and it will give you a matrix here that shows your lowest price per bushel that you put in on the y-axis, or on the x-axis, and then on the y-axis you've got the bushel per acre. So when we plug in, this is the tillage, corn tillage, we plugged in the information from those sheets, added the land rent that we're working with, and here's what we get at where the green, or where the red turns to yellow at $4.20, because remember, we were using the $4.17 commodity price at the date we did this presentation. So at $4.20, to break even, to earn $0 for all of your hard work and efforts, we had to yield 160 bushel just to break even. That's where the red and the yellow meet. So if we go on down at price per bushel at $4.20, we go to where yellow turns to green, and that's that second circle there. That tells you where you're making at least $150 per acre, which is where Van has put in his, and maybe he wants to, if Van wants to step in here and describe how he came up with that, but that's where you are meaningfully profitable in your endeavor. I'll put it that way. And if Van wants to chime in on that, he can do that. But when you look, yeah, go ahead, Van.
Basically, when I was looking at this, I was working with a producer, and obviously, as producers, we normally, regardless, we're going to plant crops, we're going to harvest crops, but we very seldom ever look at having a profit point. And, university budgets, those kind of things, normally give you one scenario. And back in the spring when we were work at home, I sat down one day and was working with a producer and going through some numbers, and just kind of come up with if you can't make $150 an acre, is it worth it, especially on smaller acres? So that's kind of, that number could be changed based on each individual's circumstances, but I kind of felt that was a good number.
Perfect. Okay, so when we take a look at that, where the yellow meets the green at the commodity price that we'd standardized on here, you can see you've got to get at least 200 bushel to the acre to reach that point. So beyond that, you're even more profitable. But boy, if you're not getting 160 acres or 160 bushel per acre, you're earning zero, and you've got to get up to 200 bushel per acre to be earning that kind of minimally profitable area there. So now let's take a look at, so try to remember in your mind the relative land areas of the red, yellow, and green, and let's take a look at no-till corn on your left and no-till with cover crops corn on the right. And you can see how at the same lowest price and the same lowest yield, so the chart is set up on the XY axis the same way with the same scale, you can see how those input costs really affect your break-even point and your minimal profitability point. So unlike with the tillage for corn at 420, if you can see my mouse here, at 420, before we were at, for full tillage, we had to get 160 bushel per acre. Here, now that we've gotten rid of the tillage expense, we're at 150. So we've saved ourselves 10 bushel per acre that can now be profitable rather than just making up our input costs. When you go across to where it turns green, now you're looking at 190 bushel to get that minimal profitability of 150, whereas for the tillage, it was 200. But when you take a look over here at no-till and cover crops with corn, my goodness, where are we at 420? Where do we even break even? Well, I took this chart back, and you have to go back to about 110 bushel per acre is your break-even point with the input costs that we have. These are our input costs here. I'm sorry, no, these were the standardized input costs. Ours are going to be even lower, and we'll look at those next. But so at 420, all you got to do is get 150 bushel per acre to be at 150 profitability. So you can see how, again, we are not focused on yield. We are not worried about how soil health necessarily is impacting our yield. We are using regenerative practices to allow us to reduce input costs, equipment costs, and to still remain profitable, if not more profitable, with less work, more brain power, but less work than no-till or tillage scenarios.
Okay, so a question we just got: why is seed cost lower in no-till and cover crops compared to just no-till? So the reason why is because it's based on the systems that we're using to represent these. So in the no-till corn, we're assuming that the seed corn you're buying is going to be GMO treated seed, and that's going to be significantly more expensive than if you went with something like the non-GMO corn that we use in a no-till plus cover scenario, even once you add in the seed cost of the cover crop, simply because of just the expensive GMO seed. Now, this is seed costs for our area, so maybe in your area, GMO seed corn doesn't actually cost that much more than non-GMO, but that is where the cost difference comes in.
Yes, and because we plant shorter season corn to accommodate cover crops as early as possible. We plant later, so seed treatments really are a detriment, actually a detriment rather than a benefit. So that saves money too. I mean, you get all the seed treatments that you want on there to keep the bugs off, you know, and stop your seed from molding in the ground when you plant a warm season grass in cool, damp weather, and you give bugs time to work on it before the soils are warm enough for it to germ. You know, you can get away from those types of things when you're planting a little bit later and you're using shorter season, which I know in the prior presentation, there was a question asked on whether you see a yield loss going to that shorter season, and I can let Chris answer that. I don't know, Chris, have you guys
So
seen?
the answer is we do see a yield loss, but again, we're not really concerned about the yield loss. Well, we started doing this in 2018 because the idea was if we can get it off sooner and get more time for our rye cover crop in front of soybeans, that would be better. Because if you get your corn off in, say, late September instead of early October, then you can avoid some of the price drop that happens once people in, say, Iowa start bringing their corn to the terminal and the price drops. That was the idea that we've had, and we do see some yield loss, but it's not really significant enough to hurt our bottom line.
Okay. Okay, so at Brandt Farms, here are our actual costs. And you can see there ain't no red on this sheet for what we're doing. In fact, for this one, I didn't even, I think we're at what? Less than 110 maybe before we can even break even. So at 420, we are already at 150 bushels. We're already profitable doing what we're doing. So, you know, I hate to sound like a broken record, but again, are our yields going to be equivalent to a full nitrogen program, a full herbicide program, a full tillage program? No, but that doesn't bother us because we are not yield centric. We are profit per acre centric. So that's where we're putting more of our efforts and more of our thoughts.
Yeah, and to address a question that happened earlier, do we come out better when we have low yield or have lesser commodity value? And the answer to that is yes. So in 2018, like I said, not a great year. And that was for cover crops as well as corn prices. So if anyone in our area remembers, the commodity price at the terminal in 2018 was $3.11 for corn. So if you look at this chart, $3.11 is, we're really close to not making any money at that point, but we had different equipment costs at that point. So we were actually made in 2018 over $150 per acre after rent when we had $3.11 on commodity price. So if you have a normal farmer who had, let's say they have a 180, 170, 160 bushel per acre at $3.11, the only way they make money is off of a government payment for deficiency. So we do come out ahead in years where we have less yield or we have poorer commodity price.
And, you know, and on top of that, you know, not only do we like the lower input cost just because we save money on that, but it does shield us from input cost increases somewhat because we're just using less input. So if nitrogen prices skyrocket or a particular chemical price skyrockets, as things are wont to do nowadays, we are somewhat shielded from that just because we are trying to wean ourselves off of as many inputs as we can. So, you know, that's always a benefit as well. Okay, now here's where Data Wizard Chris takes over. Chris, do you want to explain what we're looking at here? Is Chris there?
Yeah, 1 second, it got a bit noisy near where I am. So this slide, basically what I did is I took a yield map that I made on one of our corn fields. And what I did is I replaced the bushels per acre with profit per acre. And what you can see here is how the input costs change your profit per acre based on which system you're using. So you can see as your costs per acre decrease, the amount of money that you're able to make on a certain section of land increases really, really quickly, as you can see with all the red on the tillage, and it just gradually gets better. And this is the kind of map that we prefer to use, because if you look across the industry, it doesn't matter what kind of publication you look at, whether it's an ad, whether it's an article talking about equipment or input, everything is about yield. I think that focusing on yield is a really poor thing to do, because what do we know about the economy? It's supply and demand. The more farmers flood supply into the market with higher yields and don't bother with how much they're actually earning, what winds up happening is that you depress supply, you just depress the price. So if you focus on how much you're actually earning instead of how much you are yielding, not only will you be better in the short term because you can help yourself with those input costs, you will also help yourself indirectly once more people catch on to this stuff, because the commodity price is going to rise because you're not flooding the market. And there's not massive piles of millions of bushels of corn just sitting around rotting because too much is being produced.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. And you might want to take, you can take this one as well.
Yeah, so this is, one second. So this is kind of how, what I did here. You can see in the bottom corner there, that is the rough bushels per acre that we started with on this chart. So if you want to make your own little thing like this, you can use now. So you can see the cover crop we used on this. We actually only used rye on this field because we had a interruption to what we wanted to do.
Chris, we're having a hard time hearing you right now. I'm not sure if you turned your video off on purpose because of connectivity.
The video was on purpose. The audio I'm trying to fix actively. So I might have to bow out on this slide for a second.
You sound really good right now.
Yeah, that was actually better just now.
Okay, so the idea with this slide is this is basically how we make our profit per acre map. So you can see the cover crop here. We only had 30 pounds of rye, which is unusual for us going to corn. That's because we kind of had an interruption on this field in what we wanted to do. But you can see here, despite only having 175.6 bushels an acre, which some people would consider pretty low if you get into the I states, and even for our area, it's about average. We're still averaging really high profit per acre on this. And it just goes to show what reducing your input costs can do for you on any given feed. Now, granted, there's a lot of red around the edges, but that's because there's a woods here, so deer damage. What can you do?
Start hunting.
Yeah, we need more hunters, by the way. If you want to hunt, ask us.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Okay, so we have lowered our break-even points for corn and soybeans compared to the other systems. So you can see here that for tillage, we're up at 162 and it gradually goes down and we're at about 113. Boy, it would be a pretty sad year when we couldn't make that, let me tell you. So, and you can see the same for soybeans. And then of course we add in our wheat. Now, if we were to add in, you know, the other small grains that we have not been as successful at, that we're still trying to figure out the right nutrient package, that we're still trying to figure out, it would be more profitable, probably not than wheat, but at least be more comparable to wheat. So, and also we are participating with Indigo Ag for their soil carbon experiment. If anybody isn't aware of Indigo Ag or carbon credits, I know there's going to be other presentations during this conference on that. Again, that's another added revenue stream that we have not reflected in any of our costs here. But as you go down these regenerative pathways and start adding on these different types of practices, and you start building your soil organic matter and storing more carbon, there's just another revenue. Not only are you growing corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, whatever it is you're growing, but you're also growing carbon. And you know what? If there's a market for it, why not take advantage of that market? Plus it's, you know, the right thing to do. So anyway, you can take a look at the type of soil data that they are collecting. So this isn't Brandt Farms collecting it. This is Indigo Ag collecting it, as well as they're doing this in 8 different states, a bunch of different fields, over 6,000 acres. And they are in the process of documenting what we all kind of take for granted, that soil health really matters. So they're not only tracking those metrics, but they're keeping track of our yields. They're keeping track of our management practices, what chemicals, what fertilizers we use, the different rotations. So they're building ultimately a very deep library of proof that we are storing carbon, that we are improving things. So it's been a fascinating process to be a part of. We've been working with OSU and different groups for years, taking measurements on the farm, but these guys are really getting deep into it, and it's a lot of fun to watch. Okay, so here's a look at 2 of the fields. The conventional field is a field that we just picked up, what, Chris? We've 2 years, right?
Yes, 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years, and it was conventionally farmed prior to that with lots of manure put on it, compared to our home field on one side of our driveway. That field is there because how many years ago? A couple years ago, we had a big auction, and that was our parking lot. So everybody had their cars parked there. And we've had a lot of ponding of water in that field because of different reasons. So for being long-term no-till, it was in pretty pathetic shape compared to some of our other fields. So that was a good field to take, because if you're gonna work with Indigo on improving soil carbon, when you start out with a field where you've already got 6 to 8% organic matter, it's kind of hard to go up from there. So this is a field that we've got entered into that program, and you can see that we are doing better than the Ron field, and we'll just continue to follow that as the years go on and we stop parking cars on it. Other than that, that's all we've got. Chris, I don't know if you're in a position to go get Grandpa, if anybody has any questions for him, or if anybody has any questions for Chris and I. I don't have, let me see if I can get, yeah, I don't have the questions in front of me. So
Julia can go ahead and share those questions. And
okay.
Yes, we have a question here kind of about long-term thoughts for your operation. Chris, I'm not sure if you saw that in the chat. It's a little bit of a longer question, but it just kind of asks what you all envision as you continue with your current methods. Do you anticipate that soil fertility and subsequent yields may keep getting better? It looks like you're growing non-GMO. Are you considering organic? And have you weighed those options?
So I did see the question. The main thing that I saw was this is about, do we have enough land to not worry about expanding or whatever? I'd have to scroll back and look at it. Unfortunately, it's gotten a bit noisy where I am since it's a conference hall, but so it's hard for me to scroll back and look at it. But we don't actually own most of our land. So let me go back and.
Okay, Chris, do you want me to start talking and you can go back and look?
For a few seconds, yeah.
Okay, yeah. We cash rent most of the land, and we are at this point a suburb of Columbus, literally. So we would anticipate I think our planning needs to take into account that within the next 5 to 10 years, we may only have the land to farm that we have currently that we own. So when you look at 160 acres, corn and soybeans, and we ain't gonna do it. So we're looking at different avenues to diversify into different things that don't take large scale crop growing. We've been talking about it for years. It's just a matter of, you know, eventually you got to get off the fence and go one way or another. We've talked about organic. I don't know if that's under serious consideration. We've talked about livestock. That's under consideration. In fact, right now we're trying to put together a group to fund a butcher shop, because gee, we would love to get into actually having livestock and moving up that regenerational you know, platform, but we have no place right now. The cows and pigs that we do butcher for our own use, I mean, it's impossible to get them scheduled for to get them killed so that we can butcher them. So we're actually looking at and talking with we have a conference call this Saturday with the head of the meat science program at OSU to talk about the steps necessary to actually start or fund or invest in a butcher shop, so we can open those types of resources up to people that want to do more regenerational, you know, livestock impact on the land type of things. Whether that will happen or not, I don't know. We are looking at it. Like I said, we are looking into getting into heritage corns. We've got a distiller looking at a couple of different types of heritage corns that we've done. We've got a couple people that are making tortillas out of them. I mean, it's all where you can develop the market, because, you know, we don't even really have a convenient way to get a premium on our non-GMO corn. So those are markets that we would have to make for ourselves, and we're just kind of in the early beginnings of trying to do that. So the first step is to be open to new things. I can easily say we're very open to new things. It's just not getting strung out in so many directions that you can't be effective anymore. So yeah, that's all I can say. There's lots of openings. We haven't decided which way the finger's going to point, but we are trying to anticipate our location changes, that there's going to be less and less land available to farm. And so we're going to have to do more with less. Maybe it's going to be agritourism. We just don't know at this point.
Yeah, that just about covers it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And that also, your answer to that, Ann, was comprehensive and addressed a few of the questions that were in the chat. We have another question about what you might suggest to someone who is starting out transitioning fallow land that had been in CRP to regenerative practices. Could you give advice to somebody just starting out and thinking about what to do first?
Chris, you want to do that?
No, this is David.
Oh.
We have rented a farm that was in CRP for 10 years. So what we was able to do there was we went to NRCS and got permission to terminate the plants there like 60 days before the contract expired. We burnt that existing cover off and then planted a 10-way species in there that really came on strong because it hadn't been farmed for 10 years. Went right in the spring, and that spring we had like 32,000 pounds of green biomass. It was probably on the average of 5.5 foot tall. It consisted of what was left in the winter was hairy vetch and winter pea, crimson clover, and rye. And we planted, we had to roll it because it was so tall that it kept plugging up the marker arms on the planter and breaking off the shear bolts. And after you fix about 20 of them in the afternoon, you're tired of getting out of the combine or out of the planter tractor. So we finished rolling the field and planted it at rolled ahead. And that corn ended up at about 192 or 193, if I remember right.
208.
208, Chris said. And that's how we transitioned that farm that way. I think it's a lot easier to transition a farm from a 10-year CRP program to soybeans, but I was just trying to prove we could do it with corn.
Thank you, David. Nice to hear your voice. There was a question too here about potential farmland preservation, if that's in your plans at all.
We've looked into it, but we haven't found any effective ways to do so. There's some state program where that you can protect farmland, but apparently it doesn't work for the land that we have because it's too close to already developed areas. I mean, if you drive a quarter mile, there's 7 houses along the road. If you drive another half mile, you're at 2 developments that have more than 1,000 people apiece. So it is far beyond our ability to protect our land from development at this point.
Anything else, Julia?
No, I think we covered everything in the chat.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, we're a little bit over time, and first, it's a somber note to close on because the issue of losing some of this really prime and unique agricultural land is just a serious concern that we need to devote some attention to. But let me just say, I want to thank Brian, Dan, Steve, John, Van, David, Chris, everyone who presented today, and all of you who have joined us for this really wonderful presentation. I hope you all have got as much out of it as I have. Please make sure to copy that survey link that I posted into the chat and complete a survey for the session today. Stay in touch. If this is an issue you care about, we have an Ohio Soil Health Initiative where we're trying to help farmers implement more of these practices. So stay in touch with OEFFA, and thank you for all the work that you're doing on the land. Let us know if you have any questions or if there's any way we can help. If there's nothing else, we'll just say goodbye and keep up the great work. Thank you, everybody.